Welcome to Now You're Playing with Podcast, Episode 11. Game Informer released an article detailing a collection of console launches, and, as with everything we read in Game Informer, it was met with lots of scrutiny. This in turn led to discussions about what really was a console launch, which led to discussions about doing a show about console launches, which ultimately led to this 3-part miniseries talking about console launches. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to talk about all of the launches of the major consoles. We're going to say we're not going to give them letter grades, and then we're going to immediately turn around and give them all letter grades. I'm Tatton. Joining me are Chris, Becky, and Steve. In this particular episode, we're going to cover all the consoles released up to, but not including the NES. So stick around and take a trip back in time with us.
Now you're playing with podcast.
All right, and we are here to talk about video game launches. I am Tatton.
I'm Chris.
I'm Becky.
Hi, I'm Steve.
There was an article semi-recently in Game Informer, I think back in February's issue, that gave letter grades to all of the system console launches throughout the years. And needless to say, it was kind of informative about what came out with the systems and the climate at the time in little paragraph blurbs. But the letter grades, like any type of letter grading or magazine grading of games and ratings, just fucking was terrible. So that gave us an idea with the Wii U coming out in the fall to sit down and give our own impressions of the market during the console launches and our personal feelings, and just maybe I'm not going to do grades. I don't know if the other people are going to do grades. We kind of split up about 20 or so systems among the 4 of us, so each of us are going to do 5 individual reports, and then we'll discuss it. And if somebody wants to do a letter grade, great, but I'm not. So
I wasn't going to letter grade either, but I think for a lot of these, we were around during the launch, so I think I was definitely going to share some personal stories from what I remembered of each of the launches.
Yeah, some people had old magazines to go by. I generally stuck with, I started with Wikipedia, obviously. I'm not going to regurgitate Wikipedia. I'm going to kind of base it off of magazines and RF Generation, that website, because I also want to include early titles, not officially with the launch. Because that's just as important to get a console off the ground is those first batch of titles, not just what you could get on launch day or not. And there's a controversy about one of those titles coming up, and we'll get to that. So,
and actually, before we start, speaking of controversy, I don't know what you guys found, but as we were doing research, I could not find consistent information about the launches. Like, if there was anything that was launched before the internet was out, and I could go back and read archived articles, nobody knows how much these systems were, what days they actually launched. You go to 15 different sites and find 18 different answers. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
There was a fantastic article about, we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but about whether or not Super Mario Brothers was a launch title for the NES in its test market days in New York City in 1985, and there is no definitive answer.
Yeah, it was a pretty long article, and at the end they said, we still don't know.
We still don't know.
Yeah, no one will ever know. That's what they kind of said. So, yeah, the Game Informer article, it made me wonder where they got their info and why they're so certain of it, and why they didn't say any of the controversy in it themselves. Yeah.
It says down here that they got everything from Phoenix, the Rise and Fall of Video Games, Wikipedia, and other various
okay,
which is actually, which is actually a really good book.
3 of those.
But the information seems to be fine and debatable with some of the things like Super Mario Brothers, but my main beef with the article was the freaking letter grades. So we'll get into that.
Are we going to say the letter grades?
I'm going to say what they've got here. So I drew the 2600. Since I'm the oldest here and actually kind of remember the 2600 in its heyday. Do not remember the launch. It was in 1977, so I was 1. It was in a marketplace that was crashing. There was a video game crash going on because the Pong standalone consoles were so saturated in the market at that time, and Atari had Pong console, and they improved upon it. But then everybody and their grandmother started making Pong. They wouldn't call it Pong; they'd call it tennis. Which would you guys call that game tennis? Wouldn't it more like air hockey?
It feels more like air hockey. It's too floaty to be.
It was released as
tennis
hockey,
balls off the wall, right?
Squash.
It's like football to me.
Racquetball.
Yeah, the racquetball where you bounce it off the wall, both paddles are on the same side. I love that, but it was hard as could be.
Hockey, no, you're right. It's not hockey.
Just a minor quip. Then Atari started doing other games, standalone games. They had their Breakout Video Pinball. They had the video music thing,
The
which
Stunt race.
Stunt race.
stunt cycle.
Yeah, stunt cycle.
Can I think of any others at the moment? Probably not. But they tried to go beyond. They tried to bring more of their arcade games home. Pong was a success, so they had other arcade games. Let's bring those home too. And then it was decided, let's have a record player type machine that can play more than one game. And as David Crane put in several interviews, the 2600 was designed to play Pong and Tank. So, launch-wise, though, there were 9 games. It's the Numbers series for 2600 aficionados. The games came in these awesome gatefold boxes, which they discontinued after that initial 9. Atari 2600 boxes after that initial 9 were just your typical flap at the top, flap at the bottom, pretty cheap cardboard sort of thing. So, among collectors, these 9 games, even though they're not the greatest games, they're very collectible for, the packaging and the cartridges having the numbers on the top instead of just the name. The titles are in order. Let me bring up a list here. Number 1, Combat, of course. That was the pack-in. Number 2, Air-Sea Battle. Number 3, Starship. Then they jumped to 11. I'm guessing the different numbers are because different series. Because number 11 is Indy 500. Number 12 is Street Racer. So I guess the racers were the 10s. Number 21, Video Olympics. That is Pong. It's just a bunch of variations of Pong. Number 41, Surround. Number 51, Blackjack. Number 61, Basic Math. So, Indy 500 is pretty good, especially with its own driving controller, which is the only real game that supported that thing. If you're familiar with the 2600, it had the paddles and the joysticks, but the Indy 500 came with its own driving controller, which was a paddle that could rotate 360 degrees, so you could steer everywhere instead of just, with the 270-degree paddle, you'd be kind of limited in your steering. But mostly, I don't even think I've ever played Video Olympics for more than 5 minutes. Tatton's fired. I mean, that's supposed to be the definitive Pong at the time. Look at all these variations of Pong and color and all this kind of crap. But I've never played it. I prefer my standalone consoles for Pong. But Combat is a classic. You still play it today. People get into it. We've had it at Hexadecathlon twice, and it's fantastic. But the funny thing with the 2600 is it wasn't a hit outside of the launch was good, but it wasn't it didn't blow the doors off everything. Video games were crashing at the time, and it was successful, but it wasn't the runaway hit that people envisioned the 2600 to be. It didn't really take off until Space Invaders in 1980. So you had 3 whole years of Atari putting out so many games a year and nothing really sticking until then. Adventure is pretty good. That was in 79, I believe. But yeah, and then the Game Informer an article gave it a B+. Seeing how there really wasn't anything to compare it to at the time, that seems high to me. I'm not going to give grades. I'm just going to say that grade is high. I'm going to play high-low with this grade stuff. But again, I wasn't around back when it launched. I was aware of the 2600 in its heyday in the early 80s, but in the late 70s, I was too young. So I'm just going off history books with this one. Anybody else? Any other 2600 fans in this group?
I'm a big 2600 fan. I was born in 1980. And my earliest memories are trying to play Atari with my sister, my older sister, who is 12 years older than I am. And so there's pictures of me, 3-year-old me in He-Man underpants, laying on my belly, playing E.T. with my sister.
Right.
And the thing is back then, we grew up in Kentucky, in Ashland, Kentucky. So little tiny, very rural town, and the saturation was enough that I don't remember anybody not having one. We go to Grandma and Grandpa's, and there'd be an Atari there. And, aunt and uncle Atari there. My sister's friends would all have Ataris.
Right.
It was weird to find a house that didn't have an Atari that I could play.
But that saturation didn't take place until way after it was launched. It was one of those very slow but a lot of momentum sort of deals. And Space Invaders is what blew the door off of it.
Yeah, this would be 83, 84. So, but, by the point where my fuzzy memories are starting, the crash has already happened, and I'm sure that a lot of people are picking up systems for dirt cheap and games for dirt cheap.
Yep.
I mean, in the heyday of my 2600 gaming, when we had moved up here to Columbus, there was a gray drug that was like walking distance from the house. And every single day, my mom and I would walk. We'd walk to the gray drug, and there'd be this giant bin there that was just barely. I was like just barely tall enough to peek over the top of the bin, and the bin was just full of 2600 games. They were $1 a piece, and every single day we'd walk over and buy a new game for $1. Walk back and see if it was any good or not.
And we still have all of his any of the old cartridges have like a label on the back of it, and it says his name, which is, he still has his original cartridges.
Yeah,
so
and
cool.
we probably got like 50, 60 different games that way. I mean, it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, that's how it was with us for our Intellivision. One other little factoid: the original MSRP was $199.95. In 2012 dollars, that's $758.28.
Nice.
How much was Pong?
Oh, good question. I want to think 50.
Okay.
Maybe
For a standalone?
for the very first Pong at home. Tatton can look that up while we're still talking, but
I was gonna say memories for me of Atari are solely Activision games, and that's pretty far from launch. So,
and how old are you?
I was born 1980.
Okay,
I was
so you
played River
sort of
Raid
remember
and-
it, yeah, and
Pitfall.
Activision came around in 1980, and that's when I think the competition really upped Atari's game as well. Really,
And yeah, my Atari memories are of Jack Tramiel's Atari. So this was not the 2600.
no.
So I played them later, and they're great. But as for the launch, I was not a twinkle in my dad's eye at that point.
So with mentioning, but like I said,
never
everybody's
was.
favorite Atari games, other than Combat, nobody's mentioning Basic Math or Surround. Air Sea Battle, maybe I think that's a good name for hardcore band, which I think there exists. But
band name.
yeah.
All right,
Band
so
name.
I don't know anything about this website. It's called findthebest.com.
Oh,
And there's a handful of Pong consoles on here. Some of them do have prices, some don't, but they have like $98 for the Atari Pong console at
which
launch.
at the very first one, yeah, I mean, but you have to remember back then electronics were way more expensive. Computer like the Apple II when it first debuted wasn't that like $1,500.
Oh yeah. I mean, even the Apple One was like
Well, Apple One.
almost like
$666.66.
But that was never wide. That was never for wide sale.
Okay.
And like televisions back then, people would spend several $100s on a television, and that was a significant portion of your income, and you would finance it. And
Right.
so
Layaway.
it was a different time.
So here's the launch for Pong consoles, and this is from the Wikipedia, so take it for what it's worth. The Magnavox Odyssey is graded in this as a Pong console, launched at $100.
In $1972.
Yeah, $1972. Then this is a picture of an Odyssey 3000?
That's a 300.
300? It has the Odyssey series as ranging from $100 to $230. The Atari Series Telegames Pong is $98.95, so that lines up with the Find the Best website.
Yep.
Coleco Telestar is $50. And then
that's-
the
that
Nintendo
was
Color
later.
TV game is Japanese.
And that supports your
$100.
that supports the whole idea with the crash because everybody's competing and the prices keep getting lower and lower and the margins are
the
going
Telstar
away.
came out in 1976.
Yeah.
The
All right.
Coleco's version that was $50 came out in 1976.
And
so
on
that would have been out when the Atari was
so around the table, B plus, doesn't that seem kind of high?
For the release, well,
We're just talking about launch console lineups.
I think though, if you think just about Combat, it's still played today, at least by us.
Well,
It's still
and
fun.
comparing it to Pong, it was a different feel than Pong was. So it was, it was definitely once somebody jumped in on in the neighborhood. All right. So the rich kid ended up getting the 2600, and we get to see the 2600. People will know that it's a good system to pick up. But as for they were going into something that didn't really exist. There wasn't a market.
Well, there
like
was.
this.
I'm going to get to that subject in a second with the other consoles that were available because the VCS is the third cartridge programmable console on the market, not the first, but the first successful one.
Well, and I'll be honest too. I mean, when did the Odyssey 2 come out?
77 or 78. I couldn't even. That kind of nothing on the Odyssey 2.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing. If you look at
But
what is
it's B
competing?
plus high or low. And I want to talk about the console.
I think
Well,
it's.
no,
I
no,
think
no,
it's
I
good.
want to
like
iron
it.
this out real quick.
The lineup and the success sales wise, because like I said, that launch was successful, but it wasn't blow the doors off cultural phenomenon that it would become 6 years later.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So like when you say that there's really like nothing else that's close to it, even though there were other programmable games, I think the Atari was the first system that really had recognizable sprites. Like you drew a tank, you knew what a tank was. It wasn't a bar that was meant to be a tennis player
And
or
a
a bar that was meant to be a hockey
controller.
player. It's,
You had a controller.
Well, the Atari had the first joystick, so that is
The playability, you had a stick in your hand. It was an arcade-like feel because you had that stick and you had the button. It was very obvious.
trying not to be cheap and put all in one, because that's what the Fairchild did, and that's also what the Astrocade, like a lot of those try to put the Pong functionality of the paddles and the joystick into one control. Atari just went quality and had two different controllers that you can remove. They were the only ones that do that. But I still think B plus is high.
I
It was
think
not
B plus is high.
okay. That's all I'm saying. I'm not asking for grades. Is it B plus high or not?
I think it's fair. I mean, launching into something that didn't really exist in the scope of what they were doing, and they built the system modular to grow, and built successful enough that it was able to sustain itself, at least to keep the company going against a $50 Coleco Telestar. Yeah, no, I think B plus is fair.
I just don't know that there's anything on there that specifically seems like it was hard. It was software to sell hardware.
So here's what I think we need to do. I think when the Atari Computer Enthusiast show comes up in a month, I think we need to grab some mics and pop down there and ask those guys what they think the launch was, because those guys lived it. Like they were
did.
in the heart of it.
They did.
And they're still living, eating, breathing, sleeping Atari today. So
Very true. Very true.
But not showering. Oh, sorry.
See, I when I was looking at the systems, I'm looking mostly at the games. I didn't think too much about was the controller better.
Right.
than-
No,
was the
that's
keyboard.
fine.
So, and therefore, just with combat, I don't think I've played any of these other games though, but
Yeah.
there's probably a reason for that. That's a game with longevity. That's a better game than most systems have had at launch, than many systems have
Let's
had at
compare
launch.
to the other systems that were out at the time. Fairchild F's lineup in 1976. The pack-in was tennis hockey. That's
Pong.
that's Pong.
Yeah.
Tic-tac-toe, shooting gallery, doodle, and quadradoodle. That was one cartridge.
is that 4-dimensional doodling?
That's you doodle and it mirrors in 3 different quadrants, so it looks kind of cool. But
Okay.
cartridge 2, Desert Fox and shooting gallery. And then 3 is video blackjack. So again, you had a blackjack game on Atari, you had a blackjack game here. You're going to find that a lot of these systems in this before 1980, they all basically had the same crap. Just they're really playability is probably different, but I don't think you could really tell the difference. Most people would buy by the box or go by the brand name, which Atari was a brand name, and they had Sears behind them. Let's see, RCA Studio 2 built in. That was the other system. That was the second programmable cartridge system. Built in was Addition, Bowling, Doodle, Freeway, and Patterns.
Those sell consoles.
Yeah,
right
that was built in
there.
though. You got 5 games built in.
Patterns.
That's kind of cool. And the
Yep.
cartridges were Baseball, Bingo, Biorhythm, Blackjack, Fun with Numbers, Gunfighter, Moonship Battle, Space War, Speedway / Tog. What the fuck Tog is? Tennis Squash.
I know Trog, but
Interesting
not
that Pong wasn't built into the Studio 2. TV Schoolhouse 1 and 2. The Studio 2 was fucking awful. It's black and white only. The controls were not a joystick or a paddle, but a 10-digit keypad, 2 of them left and right, built into the console. So if there's 2 players, you have to put it between the 2 people. It didn't last beyond its first year. Really, the sound came out of the console. My view, it's the worst thing ever, worst system ever. I do want to kind of play that baseball game though. I've played the built-in games. I've played Blackjack so far, and The driving game is particularly atrocious. You go extremely slow, and like you don't wreck into cars. The system just beeps while you're driving through another car.
Nice.
No, now that we know there's a baseball game in that, you need to append
Add
your home
that to
run
home run.
derby.
Does it even have home runs? Who knows?
No, probably not.
Yeah,
You probably have to keep score with a score pad.
Oh, dude, you're not going to be able to.
it has like tiles on
You're
the
going to
top
have
of
to
the
have
system that you
something
move.
like a microphone next to it to record the audio coming out of the system.
Right. And the Odyssey 2, which came out in 78. Did I put these lists there? Again, it's the same deal. Lots of clones of what's currently available. Nothing, I don't have the list in front of me, but it wasn't anything much different than what Atari was. When we get to Intellivision, we're going to find that their initial list of games didn't really differentiate much from Atari other than being better looking. So we got Tatton saying it was good. You said it was better?
No, I like the grade.
You like the
Sorry,
grade?
were you talking about the grade?
B+?
Yeah, I agree with 10.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you?
So thinking about it again, yeah, I'm gonna agree with the B+. Wow. Just with the combat, because that's kind of its killer app.
The first killer app.
Yes.
And you've got that controller, you've got the joystick, so you suddenly have the ability to play your games in a way you haven't been able to play them at home before. And once somebody realizes that combat kicks ass, everybody's gonna want combat. Everybody's gonna come over
But
and
compared to these launches coming up, in and of itself, if you maybe
You got a
grade it
point
on a
there.
curve,
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's also not fair. It's not.
are you great? You're
What did we say?
grading this.
This isn't chalk and cheese.
But you're grading this. Are we grading this on today's standards? Or are we grading this against the things that were out at the time? You had three.
well, if you're
things
grading
to
at
grade-
things against the time, A+.
Wins.
Well, no, not even
Yeah.
A+, because like I said, the games are all the same. The controllers were better. And I don't know what the price was versus everybody else, and it ended up winning, quote unquote. But that could just be of Warner's money going into Atari for their marketing.
Well,
That
You know, that
whether
they-
or not like the early Atari games and the early Odyssey 2 games, I could do either one. Combat's the only essential Atari game from that era. Like I said, like the Adventure came out a couple years later, and Space Invaders ripped the door open, and then the good stuff came. But that early Atari stuff versus the Odyssey 2 versus the Intellivision early stuff.
I think we're going to find other systems as we go along that
That are
have
better.
one that are similar, that have one killer app, and that makes
And the
the
killer
grade
app counts for
pretty
a
high.
lot, but a B+
Yeah.
just seems high. That's all I gotta say.
Okay, so we're gonna do
So next
Intellivision.
Next would be the Mattel Intellivision, my childhood system, but Mr. Tatton will do that.
Yeah, I'll take this one. And I'll admit, I never had an Intellivision, like, growing up. I didn't get it until my teenage years. But did a little bit of research on it. Nowhere near as much as what you had for the Atari. But I do have, for launch price, the range is somewhere in $250 and $299.
There was a test market for it with 3 games. So
Yeah,
do
and
you have
I-
the wide list, or do you have just the test market list?
I've got, actually, there's 4 games that I found. And it was, from what I found, the test market and the full-scale launch market were, like, the same games. It was just, like, the addition of the 4th one. But again, the lists are all different, like on all the different sites. Like these are the ones that seemed the most consistent. And so the test market was in 1979 in Fresno, California, and then full launch came in 1980. Couldn't track down months on when it launched, which is absolutely
Probably should
crazy.
have went to Intellivision Live, see what they would have said. But
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I probably should check them out. I didn't
that's
think
probably
about
the
them.
best official history of any of these machines from that era, because they actually own all of their own stuff. I mean,
And they care.
yeah, they care.
Yeah,
Unlike
they do.
Atari. I think.
The launch titles were Las Vegas Poker and Blackjack, which was the pack-in.
Which is packing.
Armor Battle, the Electric Company Math Fun, and Backgammon.
Okay.
And then as far as the launch success, in the first year it sold 175,000 consoles.
Which, do we have any numbers of what Atari sold that first year? No.
Again, the information is all over the board between all
So
different
that
sources.
just has 4. Now the article in Game Informer gave it a B-, and it has a wider range here. It has Backgammon, officially licensed, by the way, APBA Backgammon, because Intellivision, laugh at these licensees that all you want, but they were the first people to actually go out and get licenses. Armor Battle, which is combat with more complicated combat. You had 2 tanks, and you could switch back and forth and had terrain and shit. Basketball, Electric Company, Math Fun, PGA Golf, NHL Hockey, Las Vegas Poker and Blackjack, the packing game, which is terrible packing game. I love that game. It's really cool. Has anybody ever played it?
I love it.
The dealer from Las Vegas Poker and Blackjack has so much personality, because before that, all these other blackjack and poker games on these consoles were just graphics of squares with numbers on them. The Intellivision had the higher resolution, and there's like a dealer with shifty eyes dealing you the cards and smiling when he wins and frowning when he loses. It's really cool. Major League Baseball officially licensed. That was the launch of the first console war, was George Plimpton standing there with comparing home run on the Atari versus Major League Baseball on the Intellivision. Home run, you had a set of 3 fielders, and Major League Baseball, you had a complete set of 9 fielders. Nothing to sneeze at, huh? Thanks. NFL football, which licensed, and check this shit out. You had to program the receiver's patterns on every play.
Wow.
I mean, they wouldn't even do that on Madden today. I mean, you could maybe make your own plays, but you would have it pre-programmed to just hit a button to have it play.
They probably didn't have the room to be able to store all the plays built in.
No, not at all. But I mean, think of how
you had to put it into RAM in order to be able to do it, to execute it.
Think how complicated. I mean, people wanted simulations. That's what the Intellivision was. Sea Battle, which is another simulation game. Skiing, soccer, NASL soccer, the defunct NASL. Space Battle, and then tennis, which I don't think had a license. That was the only sports game without a license. Skiing was U.S. team skiing, by the way. They licensed everything they could get their hands on.
Intellivision was like the EA of today.
It was, and it was a different take on it. And
so when something had a license, you said was there an NHL?
Yes,
game on?
NHL.
So
logo.
did it have all the? Did it actually have the names of the players, or just have the colors of the teams?
It had home and visitors, 2 teams.
Uh-huh.
No difference in players, just the license of the league.
Just the name of it.
Yeah,
okay,
they put the name
and
in
it didn't.
NHL,
I'm sure it didn't
and
cost
NFL.
them very much back then. I mean, you know,
they didn't realize how much it would be worth.
Like even today, you go to a toy store, you get like a $5 baseball with MLB's logo on it. I'm sure that's what they were going for back then. The thing with the Intellivision is, and all these systems really, was computers were seen to be like arcade games like Pong. They had crashed, and the thinking was home computers were going to take over. So all these systems were trying to out-computer one another. They all put computer in their name, like the VCS, Atari was the video computer system. And then the Odyssey 2 had a built-in keyboard, even though it was awful. The Studio 2 had 2 keypads, so it was, computer-like.
Pads. And they had Addition built in, so you could use it as a calculator.
Yeah. And Mattel Intellivision, they had the keypads on the controller, so they had more inputs and it to be more simulation-like.
Well, and also, like, even in the marketing, like, they used Intellivision, I mean, as a combination of the words intelligent and television.
Right.
And then in the initial marketing, right out of the gate, they came out attacking Atari. They had all the ads with George Plimpton, who was really like, would show like side-by-side screenshots.
So weird, but
like the Atari version,
and the
Intellivision version.
If anybody doesn't know who George Plimpton is, he was a high society
erudite.
Yeah, thank you. And he wrote these books. Like, he went to the Detroit Lions training camp one year, and as like a middle-aged guy trying out for the Detroit Lions, and he wrote a book about it. So it was kind of that gonzo journalism, but a highbrow spin on it. It wasn't, drug-infused like Hunter S. Thompson and that sort of thing. It was more, like you said, erudite. But
he's a celebrity of the 70s. And
one of those weird Tonight Show
now,
celebrities. They don't. Those type of people don't exist anymore. The intellectual that understood the lowbrow. I mean, he was a good mix, and I guess as a spokesperson for a console trying to pretend to be a computer, it kind of does make sense now. But if you watch those commercials, they're pretty awful but awesome at the same time.
Well, and even like in the quotes, like they'd have the Atari, they'd show like clips of the Atari game playing, clips of the Intellivision game playing, and they'd say that the Intellivision was closest to the real thing,
right?
And then they'd also I couldn't tell if this was from print ad or just TV commercial, but they would show the two next to each other with the quote that said, "I didn't know."
And another thing, John Hodgman, one of his books, when he made a print ad for his books, he replicated the Intellivision ad and had his book in one TV and Total World Knowledge in the other one. It was like, which one would you choose?
Yes.
It
he's kind of the successor to
he's Generation X's George Plimpton.
No, I did pop
What-
over to Intellivision Lives.
Yes.
And they said that the 1979 test market, they did not give they said a total of 4 game cartridges. They didn't name them, but we'll assume it's the 4 that I had, because those
Right.
were pretty consistent. And then they said when it launched nationwide in 1980, that 15 more titles were released, but it didn't say if they were released in 1980 or released at launch.
Same difference in my
And it
book.
also, like, there's no months with any of those, so
But that's and the other thing about the Intellivision, they were more complicated games and they were more higher resolution sprites, but the Atari could run at 60 hertz, and the Intellivision with its built-in exec, that's like the operating system of the Intellivision, only ran at 20 hertz. So a lot of the games weren't animated very well. Later on, third parties and the INTV Corp got around that exec and had 60 hertz games, and they look really gorgeous on the Intellivision. But those early games, even though they're more complicated gameplay-wise, the controls and the flickery nature of the Intellivision is kind of what held it back through its years. What's $299 in $1980?
I have no idea.
There's an inflation calculator if you just like Google that. It gave the launch grade of a B-. I'm pretty cool with B-. I would notch it up maybe slightly because it had a pretty good lineup of games. Major League Baseball being the best-selling game, I think, on the console, and it's a killer app of the early years. It destroyed Home Run. It was pretty freaking cool to have 9 fielders. Anybody else have any Intellivision experience?
I have nothing to add.
Do you have one yet?
No.
No. Do you want one? No.
Eventually, yeah.
The cool thing about it, a lot of the games are common, so you typically get one on like a Shop Goodwill or something. You'll come with like 20 games, and you'll already have a collection.
And there's box games all over the place, probably
yeah.
because they were adults.
Yes.
And
One positive is the box games, the gatefold boxes. Love them.
Mm-hmm.
so
And
the
the
inflation calculator
Overlays
I
are
found,
cool too. Yeah.
says that $299 in 1979 would be the equivalent of $886
Yes,
in
very
2010.
And another thing, another marketing thing was they were promising that the Intellivision would be the core of a home computer, which never happened. But that was part of the marketing at the time. So they were really pushing the home computer, the bridge between the stupid arcade games and the home computer system.
Well, and just because in Greatest American Hero, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which was licensed. It was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes,
it was
another
an
licensed
official,
game.
honest to goodness.
Yeah,
which was fun. It was in Greatest American Hero. So
Believe
William
it or
Catt,
not.
and apparently William Catt is a huge fan of Intellivision. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And they got the kid from E.T. when E.T. came out for the 2600. They got the kid from E.T. to do commercials for television with George Plimpton. The weirdest pairing ever. They couldn't say what his name was or that he was with E.T., but everybody knew he's from E.T.
That guy's still in movies. You still see him.
Oh yeah,
ET guy. I forget his name. Henry Thomas. Yes.
good call.
So B-, yeah, kind of, sort of.
I mean,
yeah,
you talked it
sure.
up pretty well. I would say, that's pretty low.
It's my
Pretty
childhood
much-
system,
Yeah.
unbiased. I'll say it, and Atari was a juggernaut in 1980. And Space Invaders was out, and it was the hottest. It was in its stride, and Intellivision never took over. But I think the healthy competition of Intellivision upped Atari's game as well,
No, I think it
and
definitely
that's
did.
when Atari got good. So I like to think in my own mind, in my own narrative, that Intellivision and Activision made everything, the whole market better.
I definitely agree. I think I'm either on board with the B-, or I would say, like, if it was a C+, I probably wouldn't argue it up to a B-. I think it's like right in the ballpark.
It's not a horse shit grade. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, it's not terrible. It's an average.
The horse shit grades are coming up.
No, we've got a while on that, because the next one is Coleco, and that's not horseshit at all.
Not at all. And in fact, Coleco, Miss Becky, take it away.
Yeah, so Coleco launched in August of 1982, because I can't find a specific date, for $175. Unfortunately, it was late in the game. 82 was kind of, the world was oversaturated with way too many games.
I think that was the peak. The crash started in 83. Like 82 was like the absolute peak, and I think Coleco has made that peak.
Which was good for them. So they said that their marketing thing was it plays like the real arcade game. Michael Katz, who was CEO of a bunch of different things, but he was working for Coleco. He said that if you owned an Atari or an Intellivision, you couldn't get Donkey Kong for the first 6 months. It was pretty good marketing, a pretty good marketing strategy. 6 months later, enough people had bought ColecoVision. We wanted to profit from the Atari and Intellivision owners. So we sold Donkey Kong as a third-party software. They paid $250,000 for the licensing rights for Donkey Kong, which was crazy. There was actually this legal battle that went on for them to try to get the licensing rights because Universal said that they owned the rights to King Kong, which was funny because when they finished up the whole thing, they didn't own the rights to King Kong. No. So all of the people who they were like trying to get, saying that they were trying to say that they own these rights and people were paying them money because they were worried that they were going to get sued. Yeah, that's not what happened, and they had to pay all their money back out again. So Universal was kind of dumb.
So let's go back up a second. So Donkey Kong was the pack-in for ColecoVision, and that destroyed the mark. That everybody was just going apeshit because Donkey Kong was the number 2 arcade game behind Pac-Man.
And okay, so they paid $250,000 for the licensing rights for Donkey Kong. Here's where the things get funny because you want to know what started the whole decline of everything. Atari paid an estimated $21 million for the licensing rights for ET. $250,000 for something that Coleco did. Right?
Pretty sure.
Very, very close to the same time. So yeah,
right after the movie came out, which was 1982. So
yeah, so Coleco launched with great games. It was a lot of arcade ports. They launched with Carnival. If you've never played Carnival for the ColecoVision, when you get game. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's a Sega game.
I love Carnival.
Yeah, it's so we put it in and Tatton just went crazy on it. Cosmic Adventure, which is a Universal game. It's a shoot 'em up. Donkey Kong, which is by Nintendo, and everybody knows Donkey Kong. Ken Uston's Blackjack/Poker, which was card games, but that was actually done by Coleco. Ladybug, which was a Universal arcade game.
Pac-Man clone, awesome Pac-Man
An
clone.
awesome Pac-Man clone, yes. Mousetrap, which was another Pac-Man clone. There's the subtle variations on it by Exidy. Smurf, Rescue in Gargamel's Castle.
Fantastic at the time. If you were a Smurfs fan, it looked like real Smurfs.
It was great. You actually, they did a great job with pulling those off as not just, okay, so it's pixels clumped together, it's a Smurf. It's really
it looked like the real cartoon at the time. It was amazing,
and that was by Coleco. Space Fury, which was another Sega, and that's a shooter. Space Panic, which was by Universal, which was an adventure game. Turbo, which is a driving game, and it was released. It was the expansion module tool, and I will get to the expansion modules. But
Turbo was fucking awesome.
It was a driving game. Venture, which was a maze game by Exidy, and Zaxxon, which was by Sega, and it's another shooter.
Venture was a maze shooter. It wasn't a maze game like Pac-Man. You went around and shot things with a bow and arrow. Bring that up.
Sorry.
That's fine.
So Coleco launched with 2 expansion modules. They launched with the first one, which was a 2600 converter. You could play all your Atari games on your Coleco.
Because Coleco had been doing they had their Telstar systems,
right,
which were Pong clones. Sorry, and they also. I don't know when the Gemini came out, if it came out before or after the ColecoVision, but the Gemini was a 2600.
The expansion module is a 2600.
Exactly.
In essence, it is a 2600 that requires the power off of the ColecoVision.
The 2600 was built from off-the-shelf parts. There, you could not get a copyright on building something out of off-the-shelf parts. There was no... Atari did not own the patent to a video game system. Odyssey had that, or Magnavox had that. So everybody was free to make their own 2600s, and late in the game, Coleco made their own. Mm-hmm. Intellivision had their own 2600 adapter. I mean, Coleco had their own 2600 adapter. It was really crazy and stayed at total anarchy at the time.
And second expansion module was a steering wheel add-on. And it's not, the driving controllers were, a little box that had a wheel on it, and yay, it goes around.
Paddle.
It was just a paddle.
Same
but
size as the
didn't-
paddle.
Yeah, it's the same size as
You
the
twist
paddle.
it with 5 fingers. You don't actually drive with it with 2 hands.
The expansion module 2 for Turbo was a wheel. It goes in your hands. It is a wheel, and it was great at the time. It gave you that feel of having an arcade. It was a proper arcade feel.
Well, and to put it in perspective, even though it was a wheel, it wasn't a full size wheel like you see with Gran Turismo.
That's the size of the Wii wheel. For Mario Kart.
It's pretty much the Mario Kart Wii wheel, but it was like mounted into a base, so there was something that was actually like holding it down, and it didn't end on either side. It was
And-
a full 360 degree.
And you had an accelerator paddle.
Yes.
Pedal,
yeah, you had a
pedal,
you
like
had
a pedal with your foot. Did you say Zaxxon? Was that on your list?
Zaxxon was on my list.
Zaxxon is fucking awesome too. Probably like the coolest. That's just a cool name back then. That's that 80s space Zaxxon. Just sounds freaking cool.
So what grade did ColecoVision give?
The
got a
article
B+.
gave it a B+, which I'm also interested to know with the Coleco had licenses to make those arcade games they had the home cartridge rights. So they didn't just have the rights to put them on their own system. A lot of their arcade ports also ended up on the VCS and the Intellivision. They were pretty shitty ports.
They were
some people
awful.
Some people kind of thought that they were deliberately bad to make their competition look even worse than they were. It's debatable, although I will say Donkey Kong on the Intellivision is probably one of my worst games of all time.
Agreed.
Donkey
They're
Kong
terrible.
for the 2600 was done by Gary Kitchen before he joined Activision, and a lot of people shit on it, but I think it plays pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think it was that bad.
It's only
I think,
2 boards, but it's smooth and the controls are good. So
in the defense of Coleco, I mean, I think that there were definitely hardware limitations with the 2600 that the ColecoVision didn't have, and
Right.
Agreed.
some of those games really made that very apparent.
And honestly, playing now, the Donkey Kong was incredible for the Coleco at the time, but now I don't like it so much. Like Donkey Kong itself, because it only had the 3 boards. The elevator board didn't have the bouncy guys, the springs, and every board was the same pink color.
But
But that's nowadays. At the time, it was fucking awesome.
as a launch, it was an amazing system. It
Right.
had amazing add-ons. My only complaint with it is the damn controllers.
Right.
The coils, they were wired into the system. Well, they weren't wired into the
No,
system.
they
They
were.
had the coils on them. But they had the number pads and that awkward,
Joy knob.
joy knob. Yeah, those are
There
really
wasn't much joy in the joy now.
no, agreed. Very, very awkward to play. So
Right.
if you're going for that arcade feel, you get the wheel out of Turbo, but when you're playing it at home, you've got a very strange large phone in your hands.
Pro
that you're-
tip: if you don't require more than one button, you can use a 2600 joystick with your ColecoVision and just use the number pad and controller 2 to select your game. A lot of the games, Mousetrap won't work, but Donkey Kong will work with it. Venture, Zaxxon, that sort of thing. So, highly recommend that for your
can't-
ColecoVision playing.
I can't remember if the super controller was a launch unit.
No,
Okay. Which is the most ridiculous? I really want to make that into a sword.
they're boxing gloves.
I
You
wanna-
play video games with boxing gloves on.
I want to make that into a sword.
But honestly, of the old, and you know what? Had Coleco not fucked with the computer market and the Atom and all that
Oh,
bullshit,
the Atom.
they could have supplanted Atari and become the NES. They could have become like the 3rd generation system of choice in the United States. They were on the cusp, and they pissed it all away with the Atom. They really could have done it. Had Nintendo not had a dead market to come into, I could see Super Mario Brothers on the ColecoVision. Somebody could have put that together.
Well, and they were already cool.
Yeah,
Because they had the rights for the Donkey
Nintendo.
Kong, and they actually fought Universal to make sure that
Do you
was.
think they would have needed a better controller though to come with it eventually?
That's
I think if they were still as big of a player when the Nintendo came out, we'll get to the 7800 here in a minute, but when the Nintendo was out, people mimicked that Nintendo controller. I bet you we would have seen a Coleco controller that had a D-pad and a couple buttons on it, and then probably like a Jaguar style with like a big number pad on the bottom, but then had the core, gamepad with D-pad and the button.
That's a whole what if thing. I wouldn't have mind playing Super Mario Brothers with an Atari joystick. I mean, the run button's gone. You'd have to figure that out, but somebody would have come with some controller at some point. But I think that the system itself, minus the controllers, was definitely capable. The scrolling wasn't great on the ColecoVision, but it could have handled a scrolling Super Mario Brothers type game.
Comparing that to what was out at the time, it really gave you that nice arcade feel. The colors were very bright.
Mm-hmm. Colors were beautiful on the ColecoVision.
It was a very colorful system, and they used a lot of. I think they used a lot of brighter colors. Like I feel like just remembering the Smurfs. My friend when I was growing up had a ColecoVision, and I remember the Smurfs, and I remember the blue against the white with the green in the background, and just how good it looks.
And even the Cabbage Patch Kid game wasn't that bad. I mean, I hate it played like a slow Pitfall, but it wasn't that bad. It was
Well, which is true, and I do that, and then the first thing that comes to mind is the Strawberry Shortcake game that came out on the VCS.
The sad thing with ColecoVision is you cannot play this on any modern platform legally. You got to go back to the ColecoVision because almost all of the games were licenses from other companies. There was almost nothing original from Coleco, and even those original games like Cabbage Patch Kids or Smurfs, those have licenses too. So you're not going to find a Coleco disc on any system. You're not going to see a Coleco Classics like you can with Atari or Intellivision. So I highly recommend for anybody interested in collecting it, go for it. But
get it, do the video mod on it.
Yeah, get a video mod. It's gorgeous. But the Game Informer article gives it a B+. I would say among the early systems, it's an A. It's A or A+. I mean, it's of that era, it was the best. It blew away the doors. It was on the cusp of becoming Atari.
And the thing is that if you sit down and you look at the stuff that's on here, yes, it had its Donkey Kong pack-in, but it didn't specifically have one killer app. It was one of those releases that you had multiple games that were established, people loved, and were a lot of fun.
Donkey Kong was the killer app.
Yeah, I think Donkey Kong could be a killer app.
Donkey Kong was like number 2 arcade game in the country.
But it's a pack-in. You have other games that you're willing to pay for.
See, I think
that made people buy the system, and then the other stuff's like, "Oh, this is fucking awesome too."
Yeah,
but I would equate Coleco getting the rights to Donkey Kong the same as Microsoft buying out buying out Bungie from Apple or from their Apple development and bringing Halo to the Xbox.
Yeah, it's right up there.
You've got a company who isn't really in the business, wants to get a console, wants to compete against 2 other competitors that already have a solid market base. How do you do it? You get a good game.
It sounds like the way that they were marketing themselves was very smart at a time when everybody else wasn't marketing themselves as well.
Yeah. What did Game Informer give them, you said?
B+. B+? I would say, in that era, I'd say A.
I think just for context for the rest of this, I would not give pluses or minuses to any of these because that's granular.
That's like the 8.5 out of 10.
Another little stupid nitpick I have in general, Wikipedia and everybody's kind of accepted that the first generation of video games were Pong consoles, and the second generation of video games was everything from the Farichild F all the way up to and including the Coleco and Atari 5200. I disagree. The Coleco and 5200 are its own generation. That's the third generation, fourth generation being NES and later.
I thought
there is a noticeable difference between Atari and Coleco and Intellivision Coleco. There's a full generation step, and the timeline too, and 5 years.
You've got 5 years difference.
So it's all those fuckers that think that video games were invented in 1985, ruling the roost again. But
oh, sorry, how many people now think that video games were invented in 1995?
1995?
1995.
96 is N64.
Sorry.
That's what you're going for.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of if you get anything from any of these shows is that video games were not invented in 1985. Thank you.
And the original Zelda was not the one for the Nintendo 64.
No.
Tier.
Right, so let's do the quick round robin. I for the grade, I'd give it an A2. I mean, I would. I think its popularity, given the market that it was going into, I think it did an excellent job. I mean, it failed because the market wasn't established.
Right. The Coleco failed not because of its launch. We'll just say that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd go with the A. I mean, it's got just quite the first one we've looked at. That's got quite a few games that you would want to play.
Well, and actually, do you have a Colecovision?
No.
Do you want to get one of these days? Is
Yeah.
it on your list?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much anything.
Well, I've got an extra. Well, we can talk later.
But ColecoVision actually probably is towards the top. ColecoVision
Because
and
I've got an
Intellivision.
extra modded one I was going to give away at Korg's, but now Korg's isn't
No, Korg's.
going
No,
on,
Korg's.
so I might part with it, although it's kind of pricey because I got it modded.
We can talk.
Yeah, no, A.
A.
Yeah.
All right, so you also drew the next one, the other third generation system.
Oh, yeah.
The Atari 5200.
5200.
Okay. So,
Oh, hey, actually, real quick, $175 for the Coleco launch in 1982 would have been $390 in 2010.
That makes it sound better too.
Expensive. I'm sure. I don't know what the Atari was down to at that point. Probably $100 or even lower. Television 2 was probably out at that point, and that was down to $100, I think. So it's still expensive, but not outrageously so.
Would the Junior have been out at that point?
No, Junior didn't come out till 85, 86, I think. Yeah.
okay, so Atari 5200?
Yes.
End of 1982, because I can't find an exact date, and it launched at $250. So, okay, here are the launch games. Super Breakout, Pac-Man, Centipede, Space Invaders, Defender, Missile Command, and Galaxian. So all of these guys are established games. These are known. These are
What's the
arcade
pack-in?
ports. Oh,
Super Breakout.
Super Breakout. Okay.
Worst pack-in game. I mean, you got Donkey Kong, which is hot, new, number 2 arcade game in the country. Then you have Atari 5200 coming out a month later, more expensive, and Super Breakout is the fucking pack-in.
Oh, it's
Super Breakout's like a 5-year-old game at this point.
It was an awkward system. It was overly large, and so here's a quote. All right, this guy is a quote from Bill Kunkel, former executive editor of Electronic Games.
Right.
The 5200 had several strong titles. They ported over all the best 400 and 800 computer games onto 5200 cartridges. But the 5200 was a doomed system because of one simple thing. It had the worst controllers in the history of the business. This non-centering joystick. Dead fish floppo joysticks. Just try playing Dig Dug or Pac-Man with a floppo joystick. They were broken out of the box.
Broken by design.
Ted, would this be number one on your worst? Close to it.
No, we'll have to have a different discussion for that one.
It's
bad.
I'm going to say, taking apart a 5200 controller, it is kind of a fascinating thing because there's like an X and Y axis that's built into the unit. So when the controller goes ahead and moves, it goes along this rounded XY axis around each other. It's like a gyro.
Like a reverse analog stick kind of a...
It's so fantastic, and yet there's no center. It
No
never
spring,
centers.
basically.
It doesn't stay in the middle.
And it was another attempt to combine the joystick with the paddle. You could play Breakout, you could play Kaboom with this analog joystick, and it was analog control.
And the
Those
thing
games
is,
aren't too bad.
Well, no, actually, I'm going to disagree because you have so much more control with the paddle because there's such a wider range of movement. You get much more finite control. When you restrict that down to the movement of the joystick, it does not feel as accurate. I cannot play Kaboom as well on the 5200 as I can on the 2600.
With the 5200 stick on analog paddle games or with joystick games?
Both.
I would say you lose more with joystick.
You lose more with joystick, but
That's
you lose
my
a
point.
lot against paddle. Like, this thing was it was a terrible idea.
It was a terrible idea. You had your awkward number pad. You had 2 buttons on one side, 2 buttons on the other side, and then non-centering joystick in the middle. It was a very awkward.
Not to mention that these all broke too. That every single joystick you find for the 5200 does not work.
Well,
the joystick works still, but the buttons, they lose their contact.
Yeah, the
Correct.
buttons are awful.
So taking it apart, also very difficult to work with because it was a membrane inside, and you were working. It wasn't actually anything wired. It was that awkward membrane. Trying to put it back together is really. So I've only done this once, and all I remember is, damn it, this is a piece of crap, because it was just very awkward to try to put back together. Fascinating on that X and Y axis, and that reversed Magoo, but really, guys.
Now, you've looked in this inside of one. Does it actually fill out the entire? Why is it so big?
Well, so you do have like an X and Y. They.
Or no, I mean the system itself.
The system itself.
Yeah, it's like.
No,
Wanting to be imposing.
So
no
you've
reason.
got the controller storage, and that was popular at the time because you saw it with the Intellivision where it was doing a controller storage. You saw it with the Colecovision because it had its controller storage, and then you have these monster controllers that you were going to store inside your system. So it really was just this monolith. It was done.
I will say,
done.
despite its size, that design looked freaking awesome. The 7800 kept the same design. The 2600 Junior kept the same design. That black with the silver stripe across the front and the rainbow logo. Very, very
Rainbow
cool.
logo, cool.
Very, very cool design in general.
And then also, the controllers could park in itself, like the Intellivision and the ColecoVision, but there was the top of the system folded up to expose where the controllers went into, so it actually provided its own dust cover, which is neat. That's a neat concept.
And the controllers, you can't use any other controllers on it because it's
Wiko.
completely.
Yeah, since
You can use what?
yeah, there were Wiko controllers.
There were third-party
okay.
controllers.
I was gonna say you can't use a 2600 controller.
No, it
yeah.
is an awkward like
proprietary part.
Yeah.
It's not the same pin as the Neo Geo, is it?
It is 15.
Can you use a Neo Geo controller?
God, no. It's analog. But
What was the Jaguar?
one suggestion: if anybody has a 5200, not all is lost. Best Electronics has the most awesome 1995 website of all time, and they sell
BestElectronics.ca.
Yes, they sell refurbished, awesomely refurbished 5200 joysticks. They're pretty pricey, but it's worth the $45 or so to get one joystick and play some 5200 games, because the engine underneath that system is the Atari 400-800 computer line. And that is my favorite Atari system beyond the 2600. That is a damn beautiful. They've had some damn beautiful games for that line.
So, would you recommend people put money into a 5200 or just go ahead and buy an XEGS and use real controllers?
Whatever they can find. I mean, I think there are a few. There are a few exclusives like Space Dungeon on the 5200 that are worth it, but one or the other, whichever you can find, because XEGS systems are kind of expensive too.
Well, and you've got less. They take up less space if you get an XEGS.
Yeah,
and you get
can use
Blue Max, damn it.
2600 joysticks.
You get lots of pastel in your life.
Yeah. That's
Miami Vice
look
system.
at the-
but definitely the console sucked. The ColecoVision was blowing out of the water. Game Informer gave it an F.
Game Informer gave the 5200 an F.
I would say F or D if it were I was grading it.
Well, so you look at the games, and the games themselves. If you sit down and play the games are good games. Your limitations really are the system itself and the controller. The controllers themselves make the system unplayable.
Controller in the pack-in. That's what synced it. I mean, the 5200 port of Pac-Man, even though the controller sucked,
was great.
Was great. One of my favorite.
Beautiful.
Yeah, one of my favorite looking and sounding ports. It's got that nice violent sound when you eat the ghosts.
You love that, don't you?
I do. I know. It's the little things like that get me going in this hobby. And and if you got a good joystick like a refurbished one, it doesn't play too badly. And there you go.
What would you give it, Steven?
F.
Do you have one? No.
I played it though.
Do you want one?
Not really. No.
there's the-
XEGS I'd rather have.
Two
Yeah,
variations
definitely.
with that ridiculous power into the RF adapter and all the sparking. And if you honestly,
That's the 4-port, yeah.
if you want to know what a 5200 is like, just watch the Angry Video Game Nerd.
He
review
puts
of it.
Fantastic.
That's
That's
actually
actually a great
controller.
review.
Yeah, that's a great.
That's really
I
right.
love it not only for that, but also for his 2600 love letter in the beginning of that review. That makes him that made me
Gives
like
cred.
AVGN instead of just being some guy that hates old video games because they're ugly. All right, next on
And
the
actually,
list.
I'd give it an F too. But I think what's also funny to note is that Atari released a 2600 adapter
Yeah.
that's sold separately for the 5200.
Yeah.
And if you have to sell something so that you can be backwards compatible to your old stuff, that says a lot about the games you're releasing on your new system. And who on earth would buy one of those things? Oh, no, actually, it had the controller ports in the...
You had to put
So-
2600 controller ports in the 5200 2600 adapter.
So they even directly admitted that, like, you know, the designing wise, they were like, who on earth would ever play a 2600 game with one of these god awful controllers we developed? Let's give it its own controller.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well-
guess that's probably more a system issue because the 2600 games wouldn't take an analog connection, but still.
Well, that thing is so wonky too, because it's like a big honking piece of monolith to
The
go
T.
inside your monolith, and then you put your game in it, and it's just
I think Sega learned a lot from that. So speaking of backwards compatibility, this is a segue to Atari 7800.
Oh, Mr. Steve.
Yes, which I don't know if it's the first system to have out of the box backwards compatibility, but it was pretty nice that it had 2600 compatibility. It launched.
It's the first one I'm aware of.
I don't know when it launched. Here's some dates I have. It was ready to go. Actually, it was launched in Southern California on May 21st, 1984. They sold maybe 100 or so. I don't know. Nobody.
Those are pretty. Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
collector's items for those games because they the cartridge style is different for those like 3 or 4. Sorry, talking to Mike.
And from what I can tell, it sat in a box in a warehouse, all the systems until sometime in 1986. Wikipedia.
Next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, exactly. Next to the ET carts. that
Yes.
they buried.
being looked after by top men.
In January 1986, that's what Wikipedia says. June 1986 is what Game Informer says. Now, and a couple sources say it only launched with 3 games, which the games are listed as 1987 games. I don't know. But anyway, the 3 games that it launched with, as far as I'm concerned, are Asteroids, Joust, and Ms. Pac-Man. So again, we see the trend from Atari 5200, more arcade ports that we've already seen, but with a little bit nicer graphics. Well, a lot nicer graphics, actually. I do think the 7800 has pretty good graphic capabilities. And I played these. I have all 3 of these games. That's why I chose 7800.
Right.
Asteroids had, I don't know, more colorful asteroids that you blew apart, and they kept their colors. As opposed to, I think, in the 2600 Asteroids, they change colors randomly. Joust looks really nice. That's probably my favorite of the... And it plays well of the 3. And Ms. Pac-Man is an okay version of Ms. Pac-Man.
That's the best one of the time, honestly.
Okay.
It plays very fast.
And, but again, the controller, it works well. They don't break. I've never seen a broken one.
Right.
But... as far as the ergonomics of it, it's one of the worst I've ever used.
Yeah.
You're holding it in your hand, the same hand that you have to press the buttons with, and every time you you twist the joystick or like move the joystick in any direction, it puts pressure on your hand, and it turns your hand away from the buttons that you have to press. Now you can't put it on a table because it would just turn over on its side. You could maybe mount it on a table. That would work.
But then you couldn't get to the buttons on the side.
Yeah, if you mounted it just with a bracket on the bottom. I don't know. I've thought about this a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you could like put your hand above it with the buttons. I don't know. It really makes it hard to play any games on
Side
it.
buttons are the worst
Yes.
innovation. Television started it. Coleco kept it. 5200. Yeah, they're fucking terrible.
You can try SMS joystick, or obviously Atari 2600 joystick works for something with just
Yes.
one button. You can try the Master System controller or the Genesis controller.
They
but
don't.
the
The second
buttons
button doesn't.
sometimes
The second button functionality does not work with
Okay.
those. So
Yeah.
it's, again, you can use your one button games. Another Best Electronics, again, they sell the European released only, I think.
and these are good.
NES
I like these.
style controller. It's not as good as the NES controller in itself, but it is a great
Doesn't have a
improvement.
Nintendo D-pad. That's why.
Right, it's kind of funky, but the same ergonomics.
Oh yeah.
The packing game for the 7800 on its wide release was Pole Position 2. So again, dated fucking game. You know, good
And
game, but 3 years too late.
The system it has less than 10 third-party games in its entire run. Some of the games that came out also in 1984, and these were also known as announced launch games way back in. Sorry, The other games that came out in 1986, 1987, but were announced already in 1984, and for all I know, sat on the shelf next to them. Pole Position 2, like you said, Centipede, Dig Dug, Desert Falcon. It's weird. That's pretty. It's kind of cool though. Robotron 2084, arcade game, Galaga, Xevious. Oh, this is a really good version of Xevious.
Very good.
Exactly like the Nintendo version. Well, not exactly, but it looks really good. Food Fight, one of my favorite games of all time.
Yep.
I love Food Fight.
Probably the
And
only
an
home version you
exclusive
get out there.
on the as a home version. Ball Blazer, another one of my favorite games, one of the best 2-player games, and extremely impressive. Really smooth, fast. It looks like it's actually 3D, like with polygons. I don't know what it is that it's doing, but it looks really nice.
It
Very
was
impressive.
LucasArts, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, there was a Ball Blazer sequel on PlayStation, which was sucktastic too. Rescue on Fractalus and Track and Field. I don't know anything about those two.
What was like?
Track and Field was Konami.
Atari had the rights to it. They did a 2600 version too. Really good version on 2600.
Okay.
So Track and Field is like, I think the NES, like track.
We have
or is
a
that the
Track
same?
and Field controller, don't we?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
There's a
Yeah,
track and
yeah.
field controller. You hit 2 buttons for left and right. It's pretty good.
So Atari 7800 got an F in Game Informer.
It's Millis Informed. The Game Informer had just had the 3 test market games. It did not have the wide launch games in 1986. Not that I would say it's much better than an F, but at least have some. You have some with your test market games only and your review, and then others with your full launch review should be consistent. When
I'd
you're
say
doing the research.
higher than an F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1986, the NES is out full style. The 7800 is 3 years too late. Sticking with games mostly better suited for 1984.
Also, I don't know if I trust that $140. I've heard it just sold for $50 for most of its run. For most of its life, too.
Launched no way because the 2600 was $50 at that point.
Okay, then
But
it was more
it
$140
probably
does
wasn't
that.
$140 for very long.
the games were $20 a piece. That was its marketing thing back then.
Yeah, and I actually had one of these growing up, and so I'm going to argue the F, and I'm going to give it higher than that because I'll be honest with you, like as a kid, trying to get my parents to get me another game console, we at this point we had like I think probably 80 to 90 Atari games just because of all those dollar games we bought. It was so easy
To sell them on the
to sell them on that I can play all my old games and I can play the new games too. And that's really well sold. I mean, like, the Nintendo was coming, but it wasn't out when we got ours.
Uh-huh.
It was on the cusp. Like, I remember, like, our local grocery store, goods store, whatever, Meijer, had, like, a spot blocked off for where Nintendo stuff was going to go, and some of the signage and stuff had come in when we bought the 7800. But it was, it was definitely, like, not an easy sell, even after I had the 7800, not an easy sell to get my parents to get it for me, but I was like the Atari was an easy one to play the old stuff. So I think that was a really big deal. The fact that you could carry your old library forward with you.
Right. It was too late. It would have been a lot bigger. That should have been where the 5200 was.
No, agreed, definitely. But I wouldn't give it an F.
The one thing, well, it's tricky because I think they were playing a different ball game. Atari at that point was owned by the Tramiels, and they were just a family company. They weren't Warner. They weren't thinking global domination with their video games. They were thinking we can make a profit if we produce a lot of these cheap and expensive games and sell inexpensive consoles. And the 7800 was profitable for Atari, even though their market share was crap. So again, chalks and what?
Chalk and cheese.
Chalk and cheese with the NES. But I will say the biggest thing that grates me at the 7800 is the sound.
Agreed. They did not upgrade the sound.
If they kept the same sound chip as the 2600, they could have put the same sound chip as the 5200 in there, and it would be a totally different machine in my book. But as a collector now, I think the 7800 is almost essential because that's the way to play your 2600 games.
Agreed.
honestly.
Agreed. If anybody is interested in Atari and they want to know what system to grab, get yourself a 7800.
If inexpensive.
If you can.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you can. Yeah, get yourself a 70. I have a friend of mine who, we showed her the systems and everything like that, and she went after a
Isn't
7800.
the power cord hard to get
The
if you don't
power-
have
it
Best
is,
electronics
but-
again.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
but there are modifications that people can do that allow you to use a Genesis power cord
Okay.
on it. So there are ways around it, and you can still use your Atari 2600 controllers on it. You know, the 7800 needs the 2 buttons, but you can go ahead and play it in different ways. So it's a good system, but at the time it was an awkward system to get. But the ability to play your 2600 games, you know, if it were I'm a mother, well, how much was it? Was what,
140.
140? So
NES is $199.
so
Master Systems, I think, is $199 with the full version.
so if you go ahead and compare the prices, if we're looking for, you know, a good affordable system for kids, and then, you know, the ability to get the old 2600 games, if you found somewhere where the 2600 games were cheap, here kids, here's a system that you could play with. We're going to give you
We're all
this,
over the
and
place. You were talking
and-
about the drugstore.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, they were
Potlucks.
everywhere. I
remember
mean,
having
after the
them.
crash,
Yeah.
nobody could get rid of them. So, I mean, you could go anywhere and get them for dirt cheap.
That's why you still see at the conventions box.
yeah,
It's 2600
Purple
games.
label or maroon label games.
yeah.
Yeah, like
As for an F, no, I don't think it deserves. I don't think it deserves a complete failure. I think that there is still sellability in it, and I think, you know, you still can get games that would be fun to play. It doesn't seem like it's, you know, we're going to give you nothing but Pong, and, you know, it's too late.
the pack-in sucked. Pole
Pole
Position 2
It's a
No.
driving game.
versus Super Mario Brothers.
True.
Yeah,
But it's also 2 years before Super Mario Brothers. I mean, I know that was in the test.
no, I'm just talking
but-
1986. I'm not going to talk about test markets. I want to have the wider, the selection of games at the time. Food Fight was pretty cool, but again, not Super Mario Brothers blow me away. It's like this is probably what should have come out in 1984. So I agree with the F. Although my biggest beef with the Game Informer is use the whole freaking 1986 lineup. Don't use the test market from 3 years earlier. You know, do a little bit better
So
research. Don't
is do you believe it is an F? F minus.
I would have given it a D.
probably a D.
Okay, so
Or contingent on, you know, had this been released in 1984, this would have been at least a C or B.
So you're not repeating the 4th grade.
Right.
There's not too many consoles. I would give an F just in general. I mean, you've got to the Nuon. Was that what it was? I would give that an
the
F.
N- Engage.
Oh, hold on. The
console.
Pladia. No, not the Pladia.
The Pippin.
The Pippin.
Yeah, like if something launched and couldn't get out of its own test market.
Yeah.
That's
that's an actual failure.
that's
the
a
7800
failure.
did not fail, therefore the grade F
Doesn't deserve.
I think it gets a D. And
The-
although, and like I said, it was profitable. It was a different business model for the 7800, and it survived. And the Master System, which we're going to come up on soon, had about the same market share as the 7800. I think the 7800 was slightly higher, but Sega lost their ass on that thing because the way that they overdid it, and it didn't sell for shit. Whereas 7800 didn't sell for shit, but because the costs were so cheap and inexpensive, they turned a nice little profit.
You do the gum.
We got
gum,
the links.
Gunpei Yokoi.
The Lynx wasn't so bad, and we ended up getting the Jaguar, but that was their swan song. That should have probably gotten an F, but we'll get to that.
Well, so Steven, what would you give it grade wise?
C. Yeah, I have a soft spot for it. I really like the system, despite the controllers being so horrible. It's fun to collect for, and I think Food Fight and Ball Blazer are amazing. Yeah.
So I'm not going to say an F. You know, I would probably, if I had a 2600 and I was looking for something new to get, I would probably give it a C. If I didn't have a 2600, I think the next system would be the one. The next system on our list would be the one that I would go after. So I wouldn't give it. I'd give it a D. Meh.
All right. Any other the other second gen systems that we kind of missed? I guess the Vectrex. I don't have any Vectrex launch titles, but that was such a niche machine, and I don't think that's a console because it doesn't attach to the TV. I did kind of briefly talk about the Magnavox Odyssey 2, which again with this stuff before the internet, we can't find definitive lists of what was available on launch day.
Well, and that's actually funny. Like before we leave the Vectrex, but on that same note, like we were trying to research a little bit about the Vectrex, and found some information, like this fantastic story about how like some medical manufacturing company like had made too many vector monitors and they couldn't get rid of them, and so some guy like bought a crap ton of these things and said, okay, what are we going to do with it? Let's make a video game system. And then, later they couldn't
get them for the same price.
And this was like one of the guys who worked high at Vectrex.
Yeah.
And then now there's other people who have said that's a complete fabrication, that they had the monitors made for them or whatever. So it's like even from source people in the company, you can't even get a decent, an honest answer.
Not even Nintendo knows when Super Mario
the legends are lies. If anybody gets the chance, if you're ever anywhere or you want a really good read, The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent. It is very well written and it is a lot of fun to read. The stuff that went on in the golden age of gaming is nuts.
Well, and actually, on that note, hang out to the end of this show, because at the end we'll cite a lot of our sources and a lot of our books, and there are some ISBNs and stuff up on the website.
How long have we been talking? I think it's got to be a two-parter.
Oh, definitely. We're at an hour and 13 minutes.
We'll keep going. We're going to keep going, but we'll probably split this up into 2 episodes. Real quick, the Magnavox Odyssey's launched, the pack-in title was Speedway Spin-Out Crypto Logic. So, again, nobody cares.
All right, that is all the time we have for today's episode. I want to send a special thank you out to Steve for spending so much time researching this and jumping into this topic with us, because in the beginning we didn't intend for it to be as big or as long as it was, and it just exploded into just an awesome conversation. We didn't want to cut it back because we were having fun, but definitely took up a bunch of time. So, Steve, thanks for joining us. Listeners, if you have any feedback, please feel free to swing by our Facebook page and leave us some notes. Let us know what your thoughts are, and definitely tune in next time for part 2.
Now you're playing with podcast.
Hey listeners, this is Tatton. Just wanted to take a quick moment and let you know that there's lots of great places you can follow Now You're Playing With Podcast. We have a Facebook page set up, which is Now You're Playing With Fan Page. We have a Twitter account set up, which is NYPW Tweets, or Now You're Playing With Tweets. And, of course, all the episodes are available for download from NowYou'rePlayingWith.com. So we hope you enjoyed the show. If you like it, please take a moment and send us a message. Let us know what you think about it. And we hope to have some more shows coming for you soon. Until then, thanks for listening.
Now you're playing with podcast.